Parenting podcasts can be a bit earnest. Parenting Out Loud is not that podcast.
This person who I may not agree with politically is trying to talk about integrating children, not just into his professional life, but into public life.
I have referred to myself as one and done. That article did make me rethink the term.
It took about 11 seconds for this to go viral.
Oh God, is this the ejaculate one? That is deranged and I love it.
Parenting changes the way you see everything. Parenting Out Loud takes the big conversations of the moment and puts them through that filter.
Because if parents are thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Parenting Out Loud. Listen weekly wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to a Mamma Mia podcast.
G'day, it's Claire Murphy here. We hope you're enjoying well and our current exploration of all things to do with making and having babies. In our last few episodes, we have explored conception and infertility, pregnancy and birth, and we have asked and answered a ton of your amazing questions. So in this episode, we are sharing a no-filter conversation with netball star, commentator, TV host, and all-around hilarious, amazing human being Liz Ellis about her infertility story.
My name is Mia Friedman and you are listening to the No Filter podcast. Real stories that you won't be able to stop listening to. For the first 37 years of her life, Liz Ellis never even planned on having kids. She met her husband, rugby union player Matthew Stocks, when she was in her early 20s, but she had a lot to do. Liz studied law, practiced law, thought about becoming a partner in her law firm, but then decided she wanted to be the captain of the Australian Netball team. So that's what she did. She represented Australia in netball and she captained the Diamonds. She won 2 Commonwealth Games gold medals, 3 World Championships and 4 National League titles. And she also launched her own ladies startup, a chain of netball coaching clinics for girls all over Australia. Eventually, after she retired from netball in her 30s, Liz did have a baby, pretty much on her first try. And after her daughter Evelyn was born, Liz knew instantly that she wanted to go again. And this is where things went pear-shaped. Liz Ellis crash landed on the planet of infertility after she had her first miscarriage. Secondary infertility is a weird one. That's what they call it when you've had one baby without much trouble, but then you try to have another one and things don't work. I've been there myself and it's really hard and strange because you've already got one baby. So medically you should be able to have another one. There's no reason why not, except you can't. And you can also feel a bit sort of, greedy. Surely you have no right to complain about infertility when you already have a child, right? But like everything to do with reproduction and motherhood, it can be really complicated. Physically, mentally and emotionally, and also hormonally and financially. Liz has been living this for the last few years, and that's why she's written a book called If at First You Don't Conceive, which is partly about her own experience and the experience of other women, but it's really a guidebook that's designed to help other women who are experiencing any kind of infertility. Liz is enormous fun to be around. I just wanted to hang out in the podcast studio and laugh with her. She is such a top chick, as you are about to hear. Here's Liz Ellis.
Me, Friedman.
How are you?
I'm tippity tops. How are you?
I'm really good. I want to start with the first date you went on with your husband, Matthew.
Yes. It was outstanding.
Can you describe it for me, please?
Well, I'll give you the background first. So we met at kids camp, summer holiday camp. So
Were you kids?
We weren't kids, no. I waited a little bit longer to meet the man of my dreams. But no, at the University of New England in Armidale, they used to have these summer camps, right? And netball and rugby union were always on at the same time. And they were teenagers that would turn up to these camps. So I met my husband while we were patrolling at night to try and get the kids to stop fraternising. And the first time I met him, I thought he was cute, but I thought, he's a footy player. I'm halfway through my scholarship at the AIS in Canberra. That's all. So he gave me his phone number and I lost it. I threw it out when I got home and didn't think of him for a year. And then I went back 12 months later, and there we were patrolling again, trying to keep the kids apart. This time that all got too hard, and eventually he and I started to fraternise, and
I like the euphemism fraternise.
Yes. Well, there wasn't too much going on because we were trying to coach through the day. And so I gave him my number. I thought he was actually, he's quite nice, chatted away. So we came back to Sydney and we were going to go out on a date. And he said...
How old were you both?
I was 20 and he was 26, 25. So he had just come back from playing rugby union overseas, didn't have any money to his name. And I was at university. So, and I thought, this would be interesting to see what sort of first date, he pulls out. So he rings me and he says, and I still wasn't sure about him. And he said, can you meet me at Circular Quay? Now, I lived with my parents at Windsor at the time. So that's a significant train trip to undertake. And I thought, okay. So I met him at Circular Quay. We got in a cab. We went around to Rose Bay. He said, let's get out and go for a walk. And this is where I started to think, this is not going well. We've got a cab to Rose Bay to go for a walk. Looking at my watch, I wonder how soon I can pull the pin and just get on the train to take the long trip back to Windsor. And then about 10 minutes, he said, okay, it's time now. And we walked down onto the wharves at Rose Bay where there was a seaplane waiting for us. And suddenly I changed my attitude massively.
A seaplane on your first date.
A seaplane, right? So we flew up to Cottage Point in Brow Waters, had a beautiful lunch. He knew that he liked me. He told me this later straight away because I ate as much as he did. He was like, any chick who can go mouthful to mouthful with me is my sort of girl. And then we flew back and we got a water taxi back to Manly where he lived. And obviously there was an hour and a half drive back to Windsor to get me home, and it was later in the evening. So I didn't want to get the train home. So he went and borrowed his mate's ute, which brought me back down to earth. So seaplane to the date, on the way home in a ute full of B&S stickers on the back of it. And we walked out the door and his mate, Horse, because of course your mate who has a ute is called Horse. Horse goes, good luck, mate. It goes like the clappers on the freeway. And so he took me home.
At least he wasn't talking about you.
I know, this is true. Well, he didn't know that actually is a pretty good way to describe me. But anyway, so we got home and he dropped me off, and my parents were like, where'd you go? And I told them, they were like, no, Liz, a seaplane is a plane. It flies in the air. I'm like, no, I went on a plane today to a date, and they wouldn't believe me. Anyway, lucky Matthew had invested so much in the first date, because on the second date I met him again and he had joggers and jeans on, and I was like, that's not good. But his first date was so good
Jerry
that I was...
Seinfeld.
Yes, I was... And he'd just come back from the States and his favourite show was Seinfeld. But because the first date was so good, I was willing to overlook that fashion faux pas on the second date. I've scrubbed him up since.
And you've been together ever since?
Ever since. So we've been together now for 25 years.
When you met him, were you already a professional netball player? And what does that actually even mean?
Well, now it means you get paid a wage, and a good wage. The best players are earning a significant amount of money, and good on them. But when I met him, I had just broken into the Australian squad. I was still a year or two away from the Australian team. But I was certainly on my way up. And he was playing rugby at the time, so he was trying to break his way into... He was playing first grade, trying to play for the Waratahs, which he eventually did before he got injured. So we're both sort of at the start of our respective sporting careers.
How'd you get into netball?
By accident almost. So my mum played. She was actually quite a good player. She played a match against New Zealand for Hawkesbury, for Windsor where I live. So New Zealand were touring and they wanted some warm-up matches. So mum has this program of her photo next to the Silver Ferns, which is really cool. So she played when we were little, and we used to go and watch her play. And I like watching her play, but we only ever watched rugby league on television. So I'd yell like, tackle her, mum, tackle her, not understanding that you couldn't. Perhaps that's why I played netball the way I did. But
a little bit aggressively.
A little bit aggressive, few elbows in. Anyway, one of mum's friends, Sheila, and this was a great thing to learn early, is that you don't take no for an answer. So Sheila rang mum and said, I'm putting together the Green Hills under-8s team. Does Liz want to play? Mum said, nah, she won't like netball. She's a bookworm. She's not particularly coordinated. I don't think it's her gig. So Sheila went away and bided her time for a week, clearly was not prepared to take no for an answer, rang mum back the week later and said, listen, I've just seen on television, Margaret, you won't believe it. Did you know that 98% of kids who are charged as juvenile delinquents and end up in homes have never played team sport? Right, so Sheila's timing was extraordinary, because that week I had actually lit this candle thing on my bed and thrown in all the matches and pretty much set my bed alight. So I had become a pyromaniac in that week. And so the timing was magnificent. And Mum said, yep, she can play as long as she can finish when she wants to. And so 27 years later, I decided to finish. But it was an amazing...
On your terms.
On my terms. Amazing journey, though, to think that like a sliding doors moment, I nearly... You know, if Sheila had said, yeah, fair enough, and walked away, then I would never have had this entire career. My life would be vastly different.
Did you love it straight away?
Loved it. Loved it from the first moment I stepped on court. Loved the team aspect of it. Loved being with my friends. I was good, but I wasn't great. I was uncoordinated, but Mum was right. I did like my books still, but I loved the competitive nature of it, and I'm a competitive beast, and that was the way to be able to get out and compete week in, week out. So
you and Matthew were both professional sports people. Mm-hmm. Were you competitive with each other?
Yeah, massively. So we would play tennis a bit like Wimbledon. We, like, at our place, is a blood sport, and we don't know. We don't let our kids win, right? So Evelyn, Austin's only 2. He's the whole modus operandi is to destroy any game. But Evelyn's 6 and loves playing cards. And we have told her from the outset we will never let her win. If she wins, it's because she's won fair and square. So she's quite the card shark now.
And that's something your dad did with you, isn't
Yes,
it?
he did. Dad would never let me win. So he and I would always have these running races, right? And he would never let me. So the day I won was the day that he stopped running against me, essentially. Like the day that I beat him at drafts, he stopped playing drafts because I beat him. But I knew I had achieved, and that was a good lesson to learn. So now Evelyn has to be able to actually win off her own bat.
Does she play netty?
No, she wants to play rugby like Daddy. But, I'm supporting her in that. So she sat down. She would have been 4 at the Rio Olympics, and her and Matthew watched the women's final of the rugby sevens together, and Australia won. And he was really into it, right? So he doesn't have any compunction. Women's sport, men's sport, it's all sport to him. Massively into it. And she saw that, and she saw it's his sport and he's into the women playing, and she loves the idea of it. So we decided we wouldn't start her in team sport too early. I think you can, and we live on a farm, so she's got plenty of activities.
It's funny talking to you and you offhandedly mentioning your daughter when we're talking about infertility, because you would kind of expect your story to go, and then you and Matthew got serious, and then you got married, and then you found that you couldn't have a baby. But it wasn't that simple, was it?
No.
So you guys got together when you were, about 20?
I was 20. Got married when I was 26. And
when did you become captain of Australia?
I was 30 when I became captain of Australia. So I wanted to play through that 4-year cycle, because World Championship to World Championship is 4 years. So I became captain after we lost the World Cup in 2003, and I remained captain until 2007. Had a serious knee injury in that time. Missed the Commonwealth Games in 2006, and my whole focus was on the World Cup in 2007. After which I retired, and which we won. So I didn't even allow myself to entertain thoughts of having children through that time. And it was never a big thing for us, I was never desperate to become a mum. And we talked about the fact that one day we might have kids, but it was never a pressing concern for me. So I didn't do anything about preserving my fertility. I didn't try and freeze any eggs, or I could have frozen embryos. I had my sperm donor. I found him when I was 20, and I married him, which is great. But it never occurred to us to do anything like that. We always thought, look, if we have kids, we have kids. If we don't, we don't.
After you got married, of course, everyone says, you're going to have kids,
Yep.
you're pregnant.
Yep.
Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, everyone did. And it's like, do you know we were having sex before we got married? We could have fallen pregnant then too. But it's like the thing, you get married and then you have kids. And I hope Mum doesn't listen to this podcast so she knows that, I was doing it before I was married. But, and so the armour that you put on is, we're never having kids. So, I can't tell you how hard my teammates have laughed about me writing a book about wanting to have a baby, about infertility.
Because but did you mean it, or was it just a way to get people to stop asking you?
Just a way. A little bit of me meant it, and I was quite comfortable with the fact that if I never had kids, that would be cool. I would just have this nice life with my hot husband, because I married up, with my hot husband, and we would go to restaurants and drink fabulous wine and eat great food and travel and do whatever we wanted to do. But a little part of me always thought, well, we might try. But I didn't want to even divulge that sort of information, because then that opens a crack. Well, when are you going to try? When are you going to try? It's like, I don't want to know. Like one of the women I spoke to through the course of this book, she had a great quote, which was, a uterus is never an acceptable thing to ask a woman about. It's never acceptable to ask a woman about the state of her uterus. And I thought, you know what, that's actually quite fair.
Did people try to talk you into having kids?
Yeah, people will be like, oh, you guys would be such great parents. They're right, but actually, no, I'm a crap mother. My parenting style is benign neglect, and that seems to be working. I don't tell that to the nurses, though, when we have to go to hospital. But, the people would say, you guys will be great parents, you'll be this, you'll be that. And we used to think, oh, that's just such a load of crap. Those guys are trying to suck us into their life of no sleep and all anxiety when we've got this great life. So we used to just laugh and be like, nah, we are not doing that, until we did.
When did netball get really serious? Because you were also a lawyer, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
Just on the side.
Just for something to do. Yeah, I was a lawyer. I was a solicitor for nearly 5 years. I practiced in property and infrastructure, which was pretty much as boring as it sounds. Loved the people I worked with. Didn't like
sound
the work.
a little bit boring.
Yeah, it does. Property and infrastructure. I drafted contracts to build railways and ports. But I didn't mind it because there was something at the end of it. You know, whereas if I was a litigator, there's a court case at the end of it which didn't
Really? Did you want to
wheels.
become a lawyer because you watched LA Law?
No, do you know what? I read a book about it and it sounded really glamorous. And then I got to work and went, the lawyers aren't glamorous. We work too hard. Our PAs are glamorous. They always look really fabulous and they work in the city and live this great life. But no.
Were you ambitious as a lawyer?
Yeah.
Well, you're competitive, so I imagine you
exactly.
were.
Yeah, so a heap of us started together and I wanted to be made partner, and a couple of the people that I started with eventually became partner. But it soon became obvious to me that there's certain careers that don't go together, and wanting to be partner and wanting to be captain of the Australian Netball team, there's not a lot of overlap there. And so when I was working, I was trying to do 12-hour days, so I'd try and be in the office by 6 so that I could leave at 6 to get to training. And in order to be at the office by 6, I had to get up at 4:30 to do a session before I went to the office.
What kind of a session?
Like a gym session. You know, there's 24-hour gyms that you can do. You can go and lift your weights before work. Oh, I know.
That's dedication.
And do you know what? It just was what I thought that I could do. And I just hit a point about 4 or 5 years into it. We were sitting in barristers' chambers briefing a barrister about a potential court case around a railway that one of our clients had built. And he was really enthusiastic about the placement of this comma, right? He goes, oh, the comma's here, which is great for us. If it was there, it would be really bad. And I just thought, I didn't even see the comma. And I realised my law career finished over a comma. But I realised that I didn't have the same passion for the law that I had for my netball career. Like I would dot every I and cross every T in my training and my preparation, but I wasn't prepared to do the same for my legal career. And I knew that was something that I had to let go. But it was hard, you know, you do all that study, you do 6 years of university for me, you do 6 months of school of law to understand all the, you know, the machinations and the logistics around being a solicitor. And then suddenly I let it go. And my parents really struggled with it. They had left school in year 8 and year 9. They wanted my sister and I to get an education and to have a better life than they did, and not have to do menial jobs. And my dad in particular was really gutted. He was like, you're leaving such a good job. But I was leaving to go to pursue my dream and to pursue my passion. And I knew that I had to actually we weren't getting paid at that time, right? So I was getting paid at that time I was getting paid $1,500 per annum to play netball.
$1,500 a year?
A year, plus strapping tape. Don't forget.
Free strapping tape?
Only 15 rolls of strapping tape. It's not a strapping tape tap, you know.
What do you do with strapping tape? What do you strap?
You are such a non-athlete, aren't you?
No, can you tell?
I can. When you're a netballer, you use strapping tape to strap your ankles so that you don't roll your ankles.
Right.
You strap fingers up if they're broken or anything like that.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to.
Yeah, so you know.
Right.
So I used a lot of strapping tape. When I finished, that sum had actually increased to $6,000 or $8,000 a year in my last year.
Pretty generous.
I know. I was rolling in it. Like that doesn't even cover my visa bill for the month. I have very expensive tastes. And
so, how do you make that decision? You know, it's great that was your passion.
Yep.
But it doesn't pay the bills.
No.
And being a solicitor really pays the bills. So that was a very different life that you then chose in that moment.
It was. And I came home and I said to my husband, I need to leave. And he was like, you could have told me this before we got a mortgage, because we just got married. And I said, look, I've got a plan. And my plan was I knew that I felt that I could build a business running netball coaching clinics. So I built up this business. In the school holidays, I would have 200 to 300 kids a day at 10 different associations. So through the course of the...
Hang on, you just built that business just as a side project?
I had started to build it while I was working.
Thousands of kids.
Yep.
Every school holidays.
Yeah. So but when I was working, I didn't, like, it was just something that I was doing. I actually started in university and I'd coach maybe like 20 or 30 kids for a day. But I thought there was an opportunity to scale it up. And so I left the law and I thought, I'm going to scale this up. I'm smart enough to do it.
Because netball being the number one sport in Australia.
There's so many participants and there's so many parents who need their kids looked after during the course of the day.
Yes.
So I scaled it up massively and I would coach sort of 20 to 40,000 kids through the course of the year, or no, 2,000 to 4,000 kids, I should say, through the course of every year. So by the end of my, like I stopped doing my clinics en masse a couple of years ago after my kids were born because I wanted to spend school holidays with them when Evelyn started school. But I reckon I'd probably coached a couple of 100,000 kids through the course of that 20 years. So I built it up and it became a way for me to earn a pretty good living. And then I discovered that I actually had a skill for talking, which was something that I used to get in trouble for in class, but it held me in good stead for maybe the start of a media career. So I started to do that. I also got picked up to sit on different boards because of my legal background and my sporting background. So I was able to cobble together a way to pay the bills, which actually allowed me to train all I wanted, to use my brain. I didn't want to actually be just doing netball all the time, and there were other things that I could do. So it actually ended up, and it's really, I sort of thought I could always go back to law. So that was nearly 20 years ago, and I haven't had to go back to the law yet.
Because another one of my favourite Liz's, Liz Gilbert, talks about it being so important to know the difference between a hobby, a job, a career and a vocation.
Yeah, right.
Or a passion.
Yep.
And how your passion or your vocation isn't necessarily going to be what pays your bills. So you might have a job that doesn't fill your soul with joy, but it enables you to work full time and pursue your passion.
Yep.
So they don't all have to be the same thing.
They don't, and I often say this.
And for female athletes, they can't be.
Exactly, and until recently it couldn't be. But I say this to young players who are coming through. You actually have to, and to, I speak to, you speak to people a bit, and I say this also to lawyers that I speak to. It's all very well for me to say pursue your passion, right? But if your passion doesn't pay the bills, then you have to think about how you do it. But the reason that I can do what I do is because I spent years doing the hard yards. You still need to spend... Like I spent 5 years doing the hard yards as a lawyer, so that when I walked away from the law, I was still capable of going and sitting on boards and being able to bring my experience in that regard to the board level, right? It's all very well for me to be able to talk and be remotely entertaining and to be able to turn up on television. But to get to that point, I had to do 20 years of the hard yards to become the best goalkeeper in the world, right? Unfortunately, it's just a fact of the matter that the media landscape is such that if you're a woman and you're an athlete and you want to have a career in the media, you actually have to have it underpinned by something. You can't just go, I played a few games for the Swifts, give me a microphone. No matter how entertaining you are, it actually doesn't give you the oomph. So,
do you think it does for men?
Oh, I think it's a bit different for men. And like you look to something like the rugby league or the AFL, if you can play a little bit but you've got this great personality, then you can parlay that into a media career. And I suspect in years to come women will be able to do it. But, there's lots and lots of jobs for men in sports media. There's not a lot of jobs for women. But I will say, 20 years ago when I started doing this, the jobs for women in sports media were few and far between. Now you see women turning up on AFL shows, on rugby league shows. There's female-only podcasts around sport, around football and that sort of stuff. So it's happening and women are quite rightly taking their place. But I still think you need to have a background in something. You have to have done the hard yards to prove your worth. So, I got to choose my passion, but I had to have my job and my career to get to that point.
And did you have to plan for your retirement in a similar way?
Yeah, and so I'm a type A personality, which comes as no surprise to anyone. I planned everything meticulously when I was playing, but that involved retirement. So when the time came for me to retire,
when do most netballers retire?
When
your knees give out.
Yeah, when everything gives up on you. And my body determined that a little bit. But for me, it was mental. So a lot of the girls used to finish at sort of quite young, 26, 28, 30, because they wanted to pursue careers. I hadn't earned any money. They'd put all their earning potential on hold and just scraped by in jobs that allowed them to train. And they got to the point they thought, I need to buy a house, I want to start a family. So they'd finish at about 30. Whereas now the players are playing through to like 34, 36. There's a player in the National League who's nearly 40 and who's awesome. So, that has been extended. So for me, I decided to plan my retirement quite meticulously, but I decided to not tell anyone that I was going to retire because I didn't want to take away from the Australian team trying to win the World Cup. And the World Cup was in New Zealand. We had, we'd lost the previous World Cup. New Zealand were the Commonwealth Games champions. They were the current world champions, were playing in New Zealand. So to beat them in a World Cup, everything needed to go right. I didn't want the distraction of my retirement to sort of take away from that. So I made the decision to retire, told my family, a couple of close friends and my agent. She wanted me to announce it to the world, and I was like, no, we won't be doing that. She's like, okay, well, at least let us plan. So we went through this planning process around my career about what it would look like. I started to do a little bit more work in radio and on television so that those opportunities would be there. But I also did some reading, and I think there's this huge issue around athletes when they retire around mental health. Lots and lots of athletes. I spoke to a woman who was in the Australian women's hockey team at the Sydney Olympics, and she told me that so many of the players from that team have struggled in retirement because they were rock stars and gods, and then the Olympics finish and it's cut off and we all go back to talking about, footy. And then you retire, and you have lots of people, lots of athletes don't think to retire to anything.
Because only a small handful can go and have media careers.
Yes,
like if
right.
you look at all the swimmers who dedicate all their life, or any sport, and there's only a few swimmers that you could now mention that cut through.
Yes.
But everyone's got to find something to do on the other side of retirement.
That's right. And that's why when you hear about an athlete who's gone off the rails, there's a very good reason. And it's a matter of, and I think sports can do more to help the athletes retire. When I retired, I didn't get a single phone call from anyone at Netball Australia 6 months later just checking on my welfare. Now, I was fine because that was what I had managed. Things are different now. They've got a welfare officer who actually helps girls transition into that. So for me, I was able to transition, and I did it physically as well, right? So I decided to train down. So if you finish your sport and you have your World Cup and then you stop training, you cut off all those great endorphins that exercise
And I
gives
imagine
you.
your body changes hugely as well, which can be confronting.
It does, and I didn't want to do that. So I basically just had a 6 months program mapped out for me where I could just train a little bit less every week, to the point where I got going from an athlete's training schedule to just a normal person's exercise schedule. So it wasn't like I fell off a cliff. I just went down a gradual hill. So I still kept things going and I was happy. So that to me was so important, and that typifies how I approach everything. I plan meticulously.
And was there any blueprint at the time for women staying in the sport and having babies? I saw a great photo last week of a hockey player in Canada, and at halftime in her game, she pulled her uniform down and she was breastfeeding her baby.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, and it was just the most glorious image. And I wondered, are there players who have had children and gone back into competitive sport?
Yeah, now there has been. It's interesting. In New Zealand, it used to happen a lot, and I think a lot of family structures, especially for Polynesian families in New Zealand, are such that they're far better at everyone pitching in and helping out. And I played against a lot of girls who'd had kids, and they had a mum or an auntie or sisters who were just all mucking in. Whereas here we tend to raise kids in a silo, which, it's not great, but it is what it is. I can only change one thing at a time. I can't change family structures yet, Mia, but maybe that's for
Next
the future.
book.
Yeah, next book.
Did you play with any girls who were mums?
No, but so what we all used to do was put off all of our all of motherhood, thinking about that until the end, and then you'd retire at 30, and then you go madly trying to have your kids, right? But with the current league, the Suncorp Super League, it's been now in place for 2 years. The thing that I am so proud of my sport for doing was that they have got this brilliant maternity leave provision where if you're playing in the Diamonds and you fall pregnant, you get 2 years paid maternity leave, right? No other workplace really does that.
2 years paid maternity leave.
Maternity
but
leave.
How much are you paid? Like, how much do you earn as being a member of the Diamonds?
Oh, on your full contract. So if you're on the Diamonds, you might be earning $100,000 from your club.
And you get 2 years paid leave.
2 years paid leave. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Now the girls, there is no denying that it's so hard to give birth and to come back and find your place in the team. But Netball Australia has made it as easy as possible to be able to do that. Now, there was a little bit of resistance from certain people within the organisation. I get that. But it hasn't turned out to be...
On what basis?
They were like, there was one male who apparently said, well, they'll all just be like going on holidays. We're going to pay for their holidays for 2 years. I don't recall any part of the last 6 years of motherhood being a holiday, even on holidays. So, but there's...
It's a lot like Bali.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tell anyone, though. Keep it a secret. There's a lot of nudity, I guess, but that's about it.
About
You're topless.
Not as much sex.
No.
Not nearly.
That is true. So, I think the sport has led the way. So now there are 2 women currently in Suncorp Super League who have come back after having kids. Laura Geitz played her first game in the weekend for the Queensland Firebirds with her 14-month-old son Barney in the stands. Or actually, no, he's younger than that because she hadn't played for 14 months. I can't do the maths. He might be 5 or 6 months. Anyway, he's beautiful. It hurts my ovaries to look at him. But, she's amazing. She's come back. So it's possible and now it's happening. And I think that's bloody fantastic.
So you got knocked up pretty easily when the time came.
Yes. My husband took great delight in telling my girlfriends, don't come too close. I could knock you up with a thought.
His boys can swim, huh?
Oh, mate, he was like, they are so strong they can do all 4 strokes and finish with a pike and still get you pregnant.
So was part of your retirement plan, we're going to try to start having a family?
Oh, no. Part of my retirement plan was we're going to go and do some things that we've always wanted to do that we've never been able to do, like travel extensively. So, the day that all my friends went to start back at pre-season training, we left to go to South America on a holiday. So we had that. My father had actually he got diagnosed with lung cancer about 3 weeks after that World Cup. So my immediate focus was to spend as much time with him as I could, and he died about a year later. So
I'm sorry.
It was really hard at the time, but I'm so grateful that we got that time. And the timing was perfect. If I was still an athlete, I wouldn't have been able to, I guess, focus on being an athlete and focus on spending time with my dad. As it was, I got so much time with him before he passed away. And so we were focused on him.
And you've said that you guys look very similar.
We are. We do. And, I'm becoming more like him as I get older. In his shed, he used to have his tools in a particular order and he would know if any of us had gone in and borrowed a hammer. Oh, someone's got my hammer. And he used to draw outlines around things so that he'd know what was missing.
And you're like that with your spice rack,
I
aren't
am.
you?
I have my spice rack in alphabetical order and I get anxious about, do you put
Weirdo.
ground cinnamon before cinnamon or do you put it after cinnamon?
That's a very good question. And you've also said that you look like he would have looked in drag.
Yeah, if he put a dress on and grew long hair and wore sparkly earrings, he'd look like me. And it's funny, isn't it? I often say to my husband, did you find my dad attractive? Which is a weird question, isn't it? But it's funny.
I don't think there's a correct answer to that.
No, I don't think there is. And then my grandmother, I saw a photo of her recently and she was in her 70s in this photo, or 60s in this photo, and she looks like my dad in drag. Like all 3 of us look really similar. It's really weird. So, and I was close to him, as a family. Mum and Dad took my sister and I out of school for a year in primary school and we travelled around Australia. So we were incredibly close as a family unit. So to have that time with him after I retired was just so great. So there was that. We were focusing on travelling, doing great things together that we wanted to do. We had some really awesome holidays. And then I was about 37 and we thought, we probably should do something about this if we're going to do anything about it. And we were so relaxed about it.
And you got knocked up straight away?
Straight away. So we were on this European holiday. Towards the end, we were drinking sangria in Barcelona and we had this really big night. And we just started to talk about the future and we decided that we were going to sell in Sydney and move to a farm up near Byron Bay. And we were laughing and I said, we probably need some free labour, don't we, on the farm? Let's have some kids. What I'm fast discovering is that they're not such free labour. Actually, they're not even labour.
No, they make more labour.
They do, yes. And but we thought, let's do it. And I think because we were so relaxed about it, we fell pregnant straight away.
So when was the first moment that it occurred to you that it wasn't quite as easy as it had been the first time?
So when we had Evelyn, we went back to the obstetrician when she was about 6 weeks old and he said, look, you're 38 now. If you want any more kids, you need to get back on the horse straight away. So start straight away. I was like, yeah, rightio. The moment she was born, I had totally switched from being ambivalent about having kids to going, oh my God, I love you. Before we left the hospital, I was talking about the second. So I
Getting
was
back
like,
on the
yeah,
horse.
I want to get back on this horse. It's a bit tough in the first weeks, but, I was keen.
Get back on it gently.
Yeah. Using a very
Look, we're both crossing our legs
I
and
know,
like
squirming.
cringing a little bit, aren't we, at the memory?
No, it's tender.
That first time. Oh, goodness.
Oh, man. It's like the first time.
Yeah, it is like the first time.
You're like, oh. Anyway, so we fell pregnant really quickly. At
Again,
8 months,
second time.
8 months pregnant. So Evelyn was 8 months old. I was pregnant again. Boom. I thought, this is so easy. We're going to punch out like 3 or 4 kids.
Yeah.
So I had to start to get thinking, we're going to have 3 kids, right? Maybe 4. Who cares? We'll just punch them out as often as we can. And so that was all great. And then I went for a scan and an ultrasound, your normal 8 weeks. And the radiographer said, sorry, nothing there. And I'd miscarried. And each of my miscarriages was a silent miscarriage. We discovered it before I started bleeding or anything like that or cramping. So, I had to have a D&C, and I thought, okay, well, that's okay. Like, it's sad, but I fall pregnant really quickly. We'll just go again. And then 6 months later, nothing had happened, and that's when I thought there's a problem, and that's when my whole engagement with the infertility industry really began.
You call it an industry. It's like landing in another country, isn't it? Something that you just took so much for granted because we spent so much time, and you spent 38 years trying not to get pregnant.
Yes.
That you just assume that, like, it is as easy as getting pregnant with a thought.
Yep.
And that the minute you want to do it, of course you'll get pregnant.
Bam, you'll get pregnant.
Yeah.
And you spend so much of your education at school learning how to not get pregnant. And I'm staggered at what we don't know about our bodies. For example, I was worried when we were doing IVF that my embryos would fall out when they were put in, right? What's to stop them fall out? Because I had looked at the drawings, and the uterus in drawings looks like a balloon. I'm like, what stops it just floating around in there? Why doesn't it fall out? And when I was researching the book, I thought, that's a question I'll ask someone. And I found this woman who wanted to remain anonymous, but she worked in a lab in one of the big IVF places, and she's fantastic. And I spoke to her, and she goes, it's not a balloon. The uterus is like a jam sandwich. So there's the sides of your uterus are like the bread, and then the inside is jam, and the embryo, and it's still. Oh, I'm like, oh my God, I'm 43 years old, and I did not know that.
I just learnt that too.
There you go, and you've punched out kids, like your uterus works, but you don't understand it, right? So there's all this stuff, and so you think it's like you think you know how to get pregnant and how to have babies and la la la, but then when you can't, that's when the learning begins. But you're so right, it's like in another country that the language is foreign, all of the abbreviations do your head in, you don't know who to trust, what website to trust, what information to trust. There's no map. I'm a planner. I like to know what comes next. I used to love getting my yearly sort of program at the start of every year when I was playing, and here's your periodisation, and here's your competition, none of that.
What's periodisation?
So
when you get your period?
No.
Here's when you'll be getting your period.
All the interviews
in 2012.
All the interviews I've done about the book, you're the first person that's asked that question. No, okay. So periodisation is the period that your training is broken into. So it has nothing to do with your monthly cycle, but it's all about the first part of your training is endurance. So you build your endurance base, and then you build your strength base and your speed base, and then you have your taper. That's period. It's not anywhere near as exciting.
Does
as
your
getting a
period have any impact when you're a professional athlete? Do you have to try to control it so that it comes at certain times, or do you try to skip it, or what do you do?
Some girls do. I don't know how much information you want me to go into. I'll give you all the information. I've always had really light flows, right? And so I just never
it's not a
cared.
problem.
Not
for
an
you.
issue. But there is some reason. Where some girls I know, because of PCOS or endometriosis or really bad period pains, they would control it by not getting their periods at all. So because they just didn't want to be bothered, and I totally got that. So we all had different needs, and they were all, we had a doctor who travelled with it, so that could all be taken care of. But there is a little bit of evidence around now that at certain times of the month when you release hormones to soften things in case things happen, that actually can lead to things like knee injuries. So there's a little bit more awareness about that now, about controlling female athletes' cycles so they're not so prone to injury.
That's fascinating.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So you land on the planet of infertility. And at what point did it even occur to you that you could have one child and then be infertile?
Oh, look, it just dawned on me one day. We went to our first, went to the GP when we couldn't conceive after 6 months, and she sent us to a specialist who started talking about secondary infertility, which I had never heard of. And I was like, right, okay. Oh, we've got secondary infertility. And you don't even think about it. And then suddenly you've got this diagnosis, but it's not really a diagnosis because secondary infertility is so stupid. All your tubes work, everything's good, you've punched out your kid and now nothing's working. But it's incredibly common. It happens so often, but you simply don't hear about it. And people don't talk about it, I think, because you don't want to be judged by people going, why are you spending all this money to bring, you've got a perfect human being, you've got a kid, and so you don't want to be insensitive to women and men and couples who can't have children at all. So you don't want to put it out there in case you hurt someone's feelings. So it's such a minefield.
You should be so lucky.
Yes,
so lucky.
And I understand the pain. Well, I don't understand. I can't understand the pain that people who never get the child that they so desperately want, what that must be like. So you don't want to project yourself out there as being infertile when you've got a kid. So that was hard. And you don't want to tell everyone you're going through fertility treatment because then, people ask you all the time, how's it going? Well, I've got nothing to show for it. So the first thing we did was we took fertility drugs. I fell pregnant really quickly. Second cycle of fertility drugs, boom, pregnant. I thought, okay, that's cool.
What drugs were they? Clomid?
Yes, Clomid. Miscarried again. Back on that horse, so 6 more months of fertility drugs, nothing happened, and so we thought, right. Oh, and we also went to see a naturopath as well. I think after we finished with the fertility drugs and did 6 months with a naturopath, we felt great. Our hair was really shiny, our nails were really strong, but nothing happened.
Still not pregnant.
And I swallowed a lot of stuff that really
like
tasted
bin
bad.
juice.
Yeah, like sump oil, like whoa. But we did it, and still nothing happened. And then we thought, right, we'll go to IVF, and I fell pregnant second round of IVF, and this time I thought, right, third time lucky. Like you tell yourself all this stuff that actually has no medical basis at all. But then we went to our scan and there was a heartbeat, really exciting. 4 weeks later we go back for a scan with my obstetrician and he said, yeah, those words. You see them go from joking to their face drops, and then he said, I'm really sorry, I can't find a heartbeat. And I was like, there was one there a couple of weeks ago, there's got to be one there. He said, look, I'm not usually wrong about this, but he was attached to a hospital and he said, we'll send you downstairs. And so we spent an hour and a half waiting in this very crowded room for a scan, and the radiographer just looked at me and said the same thing. I'm really sorry, there's no heartbeat. I can see the baby, but I can't see a heartbeat. And so she left us to our own devices, and I just broke down. I had a massive emotional meltdown, cried into my husband's shoulders. I was like, there was a baby there. There was a baby there.
How many weeks were you?
I was 10 weeks. So, we start to talk about names, and the worst thing you can do is develop hope around it, because when you miscarry, all that hope gets shattered, and that's what hurts. And it was awful. It was the worst. And I spent months beating myself up about it.
There's nothing quite as lonely as being in that ultrasound room with the picture of your baby up on the screen and your stomach protruding and there being no heartbeat.
Nothing.
It's funny that I'm interviewing you today because I lost a baby halfway through my pregnancy, and today she would have turned 18.
Oh, wow.
And I'm in that ultrasound room when you say that. I'm there. I can remember everything about it. And I also was just sobbing into my husband's shoulder.
Yep.
God help the poor women who have to be in that room alone, because sometimes your husband or your partner, or you might not have a partner, or else they're not at that appointment.
Yeah.
And what people find, what's the most confronting? There's a million things that are confronting, but that sense that your body's failed you.
Yep, it's let you down.
And I imagine as a professional athlete, that was incredibly tough for you.
It's so tough. I was angry. I was frustrated. All the things that I had learnt through my athletic career.
It's all the phases of grief, isn't it? Anger, frustration, denial.
Totally. Denial's amazing. Yeah. You think to yourself, maybe I'll go back and the baby will still be there. Yeah. And, I had to have another D&C. And I was like, you think to yourself as you're going, oh, maybe I shouldn't be having this. Maybe, just maybe,
I kept thinking I could feel the baby kicking afterwards.
It's amazing, isn't it? Your brain's an amazing thing, but you have to go through those stages. And, you know, I kept saying, I remember one night just lying in bed and I cried myself to sleep for so long. And I said to my husband, why did we wait so long? You know, why? Why did we wait till we were so old? Why? And, you know, he looked at me and he said, we had so much on. I was building my business. You were winning World Cups and winning gold. We made our choices, you know, and we've got a beautiful little girl, but we made our choices. And, you know, he was doing his best to help me, but there was I had to get through I had to go through those phases. You know, there's nothing that anyone can say to you.
No one can. And even if someone's been through it before, my friend Beck Sparrow and I always talk about, she had a little girl, my goddaughter, who was stillborn, and we say you can't pull someone through the grief. All you can do is light little candles along the way to help them sort of see that path and feel less alone. Yep. But there's no shortcuts. You've got to walk it.
And there's no language for it. You know, there's no language for the grief of miscarriage. And even, you know, a journalist, Alice Clark, who has an extraordinary story. I've got a little excerpt from an article that she wrote about before miscarriage, even when you go through IVF and you have the embryo transfer and you go to see if it has taken and it hasn't, that's a grieving process as well. But how do you talk about grief for something that actually has never existed?
And for someone you've never met.
Yes, exactly.
And you have no memories of.
No. And so around, you know, I think that language, I love language, and language is ancient, right? And it's developed over, you know, tens of thousands of years, but we still don't have words around this form of grief. And so as a result, women don't talk about it. And while I was writing my book, actually, Em Rusciano miscarried and put it out there, and I thought that was so brave and so great because it started women talking. And it was on her Facebook page, or the Facebook page, and I went and looked, and there was something like 3,500 comments, almost all of them from women saying, this happened to me, this happened to me. And I thought, we need to keep talking like this because it doesn't make it okay, but it makes you feel so much less alone when you see there's so many people it's happened to.
It's like a secret society nobody wants to join.
No, exactly.
We've got a whole community called Never Forgotten, and we've got, you know, because when it happened to me, it was before the internet, so there was no way for me to know and I didn't know anyone who'd had a miscarriage before. So I made sure that when I started Mamma Mia that we've got a whole ebook of women's stories, and we've got a closed Facebook group called Never Forgotten, where women do things like share photos of their babies who have been stillborn or who have died, and no one else wants to see those photos except for other women who can say, your baby's beautiful, what a beautiful baby you have. And you want to talk about what they might have been and the name that you might have given them. And you often find that even your partner is not on the same page of grief or you know, the path as you are, and it can be so isolating. I think that the strength that you draw from other women in that situation is the best.
Oh, and you know, you learn about how resilient you are, and I can't imagine going through what you went through. I spoke to a woman writing this book who I get teary even telling her story, but it's a story that is it resonates so much. So she went through 12 rounds of IVF and fell pregnant with twins, and she was like, 12 rounds of I did 5 rounds and went, that's enough, that'll do me. 12 rounds. Fell pregnant with twins, and at 20 weeks had to deliver them. They were stillborn at 20 weeks, right? So her memory of that is, and we're talking about relationships, and she said this really made her fall in love with her husband all over again. The babies were born, and when they came out, her memory is him talking to these dead babies, right? And giving them a story, right? It's so emotional when you tell the story, but it was beautiful. Anyway, she went on and had 6 more rounds of IVF and had her babies. But to do that, like, you think about the resilience of the human heart, it's extraordinary. Now I'm going to cry all over everything.
And then you do feel, I think, because I also had secondary infertility, and after I lost that baby, I then couldn't conceive, and I had to have Clomid, and it took a long time. I was just about to try IVF when I fell pregnant with my daughter. You found out. I was going to ask you, why did this one hit you so hard? Because you'd had 3 miscarriages before. Why was this one so different?
Because we'd seen the heartbeat, I think, and it was like it was winking at us, you know, sit tight, I'm coming. And so because we'd seen the heartbeat and we got so far, it was all like you look at the stats, well, 98% of babies, when they see a heartbeat, they're fine. Never occurred to me that we'd fall into that 2% despite my previous history.
I love that you were so optimistic.
Oh, no. And you know what? It is a human thing to be optimistic. And I'm an optimist anyway.
Not for everyone.
No,
Clearly you don't have anxiety.
No, I don't actually. Probably got the opposite to my detriment as well. But, I was so I was like, yep, this is going to be us. And, the stats are that once you've had one miscarriage, you're more likely to miscarry again. So, but that never occurred to me. And I thought, and then when it hit me as well, because after I had the miscarriage, I insisted on having a biopsy, and because I thought, is there something that is happening that we don't know about? And it turned out that the baby was a little boy, and that he had this syndrome around, I forget the name of it, but had he been born, it would have been not a life that you'd wish on anyone, full of pain, a short life, and then an early death.
How did that make you feel? Were you relieved to find that out, that there was a reason?
I was relieved on his behalf that there was a reason. I was relieved on his behalf that he never made it. It's good that when there's a reason, but the reason was because the genetic lottery hadn't worked in our favour. So it was a reason that we could do nothing about, But then it's you go, okay, well, it's nothing that's wrong with my bits or my insides. It's just, and when you're older, your eggs are imperfect anyway. The older you get, the more imperfect they get. So that was good. But then I think it hit me hard afterwards, because we got the results of the biopsy back, and suddenly he became even more of a person because we knew his gender, as a little boy.
That makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It's huge. And so, all the hopes that we had, and we had started to think about names, and, the name that I was always strong on was the name that we eventually gave our son when he was born. But you allow yourself to think. And so, for me, it hit me so hard. I was 41 when it happened. So I could feel my fertility slipping through my fingers.
Wow.
I was like, that's it.
Old eggs, man.
Old eggs, they were fried. And so we made the decision we were going to do 2 more rounds and get any embryos that we got genetically tested. And we only got 2 embryos each round. All of them, I got 4 phone calls saying, I'm so sorry, genetically they're incompatible with life, we're going to let them succumb, which is a nice way of saying I'm going to pull them out of the freezer and thaw them out, and then we'll discard them. So you go, there's little lives just there, and they're not going to live, and off they go. They're in some waste somewhere. So that's a horrible thing to. And then I thought, I can't do this. And we thought we're focusing on this baby that we don't have, and we're not focusing on this little girl that we do have. Let's do that. And then my sister rang me a few weeks later.
So you decided to stop IVF?
Decided to stop IVF. That was it.
One child, one and done.
Yep. And I started to research holidays, and we're going to go to America. We go to New York. Started telling Evelyn what a great city New York is. Anyway, she's still waiting to go to New York. And then my sister rang and said, let's do one more round. Let me be an egg donor. And
she's younger than you,
She's
obviously.
a couple of years younger. She had both her kids IVF, but when she did her little boy was about 6 months old, and when she did her last round, she had heaps of eggs. They got heaps of embryos. So she was like, there's something good going on. Our kids look like each other. Her little girl is like me, tall and skinny, brunette, loves netball, loves books, right? She's like a mini me, incredibly competitive. My little girl is like my sister. She's horrible in the mornings. It takes a while to get going. Looks like her little cutesy little face. And so we were like, it took me half a second to go, yep, great idea, let's do it. So we did all the counselling, all the genetic counselling.
Because that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Our husbands needed to be convinced. We had to talk to them.
I was going to say, were they on board straight away?
Not straight away, but they didn't take them long. We're really close.
I don't have a sister, but I imagine if you take anyone's eggs, your sisters would be the ones.
Yeah. But the counselling was good because they brought up things that were going to come up that we hadn't thought of, just around telling other people, what's the story, how do you deal with it? So you've given someone your eggs and then you don't like how they're parenting the results of your eggs. So we had to deal with all that, and that was really good. And
it's almost impossible. That was your only option unless you got eggs from overseas.
Exactly.
Because eggs, it's not like sperm. There's not really an egg bank in Australia that you can draw from.
No, there's a World Egg Bank in America, but it's expensive.
So you can donate to people that you know.
You can
with
donate.
Counselling.
Yeah, and you can actually donate anonymously if you wish.
But it's a pretty invasive process.
Massively invasive. It's easier to donate sperm than it is to donate eggs.
Yeah, clearly. I wanted to ask you about that. Just going back to IVF and all the fertility treatment that you had. being treated for infertility when you're a woman is so invasive. It's needles and pain and things up your vag and ultrasounds
Massive
up
hormonals.
your vag. Just all the things and taking things. Men, it's actually just masturbating, isn't
they
it?
just wank.
Having an orgasm.
Yeah.
So that seems a little bit unfair, doesn't it?
It does. But you know what's really interesting? Through the course of writing this book, I really started to think about male infertility and about the fact that when men are infertile, it hits them so hard. And I don't think we talk a lot of it's hard for women, but one of the hardest things for these men is that when they're infertile, you can work around it, right? You can still, if you're not producing any sperm in your semen, you can have a testicular biopsy when they put a needle up into your testicles, which sort of levels up the karma stakes a little bit. But lots of men I spoke to who had done
That's
that,
not as pleasant as just going into a room
and
with
having
a porno in a
right.
jar.
That's exactly right. And sometimes a light beer if you're at a flash place. But lots of men, a couple of men I spoke to who had the testicular biopsy, and then their partners had gone through IVF, and there was no infertility issue with their partner. They suffered an immense sense of guilt that they were making. It was their fault that their partner was going through this, and they didn't know how to deal with it or who to turn to, and it put an enormous strain on their relationship. And one man said that he turned to his partner and said, "You need to leave me and not be with someone who's a dud like me." So, we do.
I would say that I felt that way as a woman, though.
Did you?
Yeah, I felt I have one job in the world biologically, which is to continue the species and carry a child, given that I wanted to have a child, to carry this child to term. It was my job to get her safely born, and I failed at that job.
Yep.
I very much saw that. I felt, in the depths of despair at times of how I had failed as a mother, I'd failed as a woman. Yeah,
Yep.
it ran pretty deep for me too.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And I don't think we address that enough.
No.
We talk about the process, what you can do about
Yeah.
it, but we don't delve into what it does to your sense of being.
Oh, yeah.
And I had women say that to me, but I think women deal with it a little better than men because they talk. They know to talk about it, right? And society treats infertility as a women's issue. So there's almost like you have permission to speak about it. Men, I had to really cajole men through their partners, promising them foot massages, let's say, to talk to me, right?
Yep.
They didn't want to talk. And there were men who I wanted to talk to who wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't share their story. Women were far more able. Some of the men I spoke to were brilliant, quite happy to share their stories and very matter of fact about it. One man had mumps, led to infertility. He knew that it wasn't his fault. He had a lot of time to process that. So it's so visceral, I think, for both sexes, but then how we deal with it is very different. I think women deal with it a little bit better, whereas men don't deal with it particularly well at all.
So you got approved for your sister to donate her eggs?
Yep. She was allowed. We were all ready to go. And we were just waiting for my day one. She had a, what are they called? The marinas in,
I got one of those.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. An IUD.
Yeah, so she had that going on. And so that was good because on my day one, she would then have to go to the fertility clinic, have hers taken out, and she could start straight away, right? So we're like, oh, this is great. And she's a school teacher and school holidays were coming up. And when my day one was due was the start of the
plan.
school. Oh, no, it was perfect, right? And she rang me and I wasn't even thinking. She rang me, she goes, have you got your day one yet? I go, no. What's the date? And she said, well,
Day one is when your period comes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So start of your cycle. I said, nah, day one's not here. And she was like, well, hurry up. I'm like, I can't do anything about it. So we had this, as sisters do, this stupid conversation. And then a few days later, she rang back. She goes, you need to find out what's happening because school holidays are about to end, blah, blah, blah. Because she's a school teacher. So it had to be all sort of synced up.
The window's going to close.
Yeah, window's going to. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know what to do. She goes, we'll start with a pregnancy test. Pregnancy test, 2 pink lines.
Oh,
I
my
was
God.
pregnant naturally. I didn't know what to do. And I went to tell my husband and he was like he was working at another farm. He's a farmer. He was working at the other farm. And I drove up and he goes, what are you doing here? He thought someone had died because I'd driven to this farm because I would never drive there. And I told him and he was just like, we were in shock, in this state of shock. But we were both so protective because we knew we'd had 3 miscarriages. And I went from being an optimist to suddenly being...
Welcome to my world.
This isn't going to last. This baby will go the same way as all the others. So I didn't allow myself to get excited. But I told my sister, everyone that I told was so excited except for her, because she wanted skin in the game. She was really keen to see.
She made that mental leap.
She was a bit like, oh, what? You don't need my eggs anymore. I'm like, yeah, sorry.
That's hilarious.
So that was pretty funny. We laugh at that now, but she was a bit bummed. Everyone else was excited.
It's like, don't worry, I could still have a miscarriage. Things could be okay
exactly.
for you.
This could go the same way as all the others. So anyway, it was like, and so for the next sort of 16 to 20 weeks, I was really just had a wall, went through the process. You look after yourself, but I was like, no, I'm just...
You don't connect, do you?
And even when we got past the 12 weeks, wouldn't allow myself. And then it wasn't until I felt him kick and I went, yeah, okay, you're here.
Oh, wow.
And that was when the bonding started.
Any pregnancy after infertility or miscarriage is a mind
full of anxiety.
Trip.
Yeah,
It's very, very difficult. And I know I felt the same way. I felt that there was a certain point where I made a conscious decision, okay, I got to back you. I got to back you now.
Yeah.
Like I've been detached, but I've now. And it was literally a real shift in how you thought about it. And that's when the bonding process starts.
Yep. And, I think it's great when you can bond straight away. But, if you start bonding the week before your baby's born or 2 weeks after your baby's born, it doesn't matter. You're bonding. It doesn't matter when the bonding starts. And my bonding with my little fella kicked in at about halfway through. And then I was there, I was like, yeah. But then you're still anxious, right? You're still anxious about you hear about people having late-term miscarriages, and then, I was over 40 and I was like, I had this anxiety about, women over 40, there's a high percentage of miscarriage if you go over, and I'd gone over with Evelyn, but she was fine.
Gone over your due date.
Over my due date, so past 40 weeks. And so we eventually just induced Austin, I think a week before, plus he was bloody enormous, and I thought, if I'm going to squeeze this massive watermelon out of my vagina, we probably need to get him started now.
Because every ultrasound appointment, I would find that in the days leading up to every appointment, I'd want to have ultrasounds constantly,
yes,
but in the days leading up to them, I would get more and more anxious because you never have that carefree, oh, we're going to see the baby, because you've lain there before and had the wand and the sad face of the sonographer.
Don't you look at their face the whole
and they
time.
chat and you start and you're all joking, and then they just don't talk anymore, and then they're looking very seriously and intently. And I was never one of those people who could look at the ultrasound and work out what was going on, but you do then tune right into that heartbeat.
Yeah.
So that those ultrasounds are incredibly stressful right up until the end.
Yep, so stressful. And I had placenta previa, and this, again, I had no idea about your placenta. The first time I didn't have to know. It just was all. And so, placenta previa is when your placenta, the opening is a little bit closed over.
Yeah, it's over the cervix.
To the cervix.
The placenta's over the cervix.
And so I wanted to give birth naturally, and I was like, okay, I don't care how this kid comes out, natural, Caesar. I really don't give a shit as long as I get this baby. And so I had to have extra scans around that to sort of see what was happening. But even though by this point, the baby was 37 weeks or something that I had this scan, and that he could come out now and he would survive, you still have that anxiety. I was like, I just want to get him out.
Yeah, you do. So why'd you write the book?
Because
you're all done.
I'm done. I'm dusted. I've got my kids, because I kept every piece of information that I had. And when I got to the end, I looked back and I thought, the whole time we were going through this treatment, the fertility treatment, I felt like I was walking blind in a snowstorm and everything that I needed was white, right? How do you find what you need when you can't see? There's no roadmap. Whereas I looked back and I thought, there's actually some planning that you can do at the start.
Because so much of it is about a lack of control, isn't it?
Total lack of control.
And there's so much information out there.
Yep. And so I would Google constantly about fertility stuff. And, oh, my God, there's a fertility smoothie. What about royal bee jelly? What about maca powder? Stuff that has no scientific basis. And you're so, oh, my God. And I wanted to sort of provide some reassurance. I thought, I've got this information and I've got an idea that actually there is a roadmap and a strategy that you can approach your fertility treatment with. How stupid is it for it to be in my head? Why don't I write about it? I thought it was a great idea until I actually had to sit down and write. You have to be so careful about writing anything to do with this sort of stuff. And I realised that the more I knew, the more I found out I didn't know. I mean, this book could have been 50,000 pages long because it's a huge industry. So I had to sort of duck and dive a bit and really make some decisions. I got some advice early on, which was to get past my own story. So there are so many fertility stories and so many ways to be infertile and so many outcomes that I had to get past that, and I'm glad I did, because it allowed me then to let other people's stories in, and you see there's a whole multitude. So I wanted to help people see their way through, and the more I spoke to people who had been through that journey and been on that journey, they all said the same thing. They often told me their stories, and they were saying it out loud for the first time to anyone, and it was quite emotional. But they all to a person said, I'm doing this to light the way for the next person that comes along. And in this world, all we hear about is rubbish, horrible things that happen. And to have this months-long conversations with people about them wanting to help people that they don't even know was amazing. And people who had been on the receiving end of donations, and the families that they created because someone they didn't know gave them a beautiful gift of love. You know, at the end of the story, you think this is a love story. It's about what people will do for love, what people will do to love because they love their partner, or because they want to give something to somebody and they don't want anything in return. It's phenomenal. So, you know, I had this idea for writing the book, and it changed a lot from when I started to when I finished, because there's just so much. But I still think that if you go into your fertility treatment with a strategy and a plan, you'll come out the other side okay, regardless of the result.
When you say regardless of the result, you have an incredible email in here that you sort of reproduced part of from a woman who didn't have a happy ending, because not everybody does.
No, and
I always thought when I lost my baby, I always thought, when I have my future baby in my arms, it will make sense why I went through this, why I went through the infertility, why I went through the pregnancy loss, why I went through this grief. But some women don't get that resolution.
No.
And not that there's ever closure in grief, but you sort of go, I look at my children now and I go, if that baby had lived, I wouldn't have you guys. Mm. But what when that doesn't happen? What when you can't wrap it up in a bow and go, oh, that was a good ending to the story?
And interestingly, I'll get to that email in a sec, but I had a really fascinating conversation with a woman who works in television who's really well known, but I won't give her name away. And she was talking about having a miscarriage, and she didn't have any children after her miscarriage. So she had 2 kids, had a miscarriage, and never had any more children. And she still carries, she says she still feels the grief and the pain of that miscarriage is very raw, because if you have a baby afterwards, it's such a salve, right? So the grief and pain from my miscarriages will always be with me, but my baby, my little boy, is such a great salve for that. So, you know, there's 2 outcomes of that as well. And you almost, again, can't talk about that grief because you've got 2 other kids. So what are you whinging about?
It's like a wound that never is sutured over.
No, never. And when you have a baby, that's a suture, but it leaves a scar, right? That's a really good way to think about it. So, but this woman who I spoke to, I spoke to 2 women who never got their babies, and both of them, and one of them, her marriage had broke down. And this woman who gave me the email, her marriage had broke down after the fertility treatment. And
because deciding when to stop, how do you decide?
Well, that's a really tough thing, and there's not an answer to that, right? You only know, but I advise people when you go into it, even if it's an hour with your partner, spend some time thinking about when would be a good time to stop. And your brain is able to do that in a much more logical fashion before you get into the emotions of it. When you get into the emotions of fertility treatment, your lizard brain takes over, right? The little primitive part of your brain that is made for flight, fear, and reproduction. I know you can think about the other things starting with F, but you know we're a family podcast here. So
I like the way you just pivoted to reproduction.
Yeah, well, I had to.
There.
Yeah,
took
thanks.
my mind a minute to catch up, but I'm there now.
You're caught up,
Good.
right? So so when you're in the middle of all this emotional upheaval and fear, and your lizard brain takes over and says, "No, keep going," whereas before you start, you're actually far more rational, right? So I think what I would like for people to do is to start with and say, what would be our end point now before we go to, is it money? Do we hit a certain amount of money and then go, do you know what, we can't afford anymore? Is it age? Do we go past this birthday, we can't go anymore? Is it number of cycles? When you're being rational, what are you prepared to do? Now, even if you get to that point and you decide to go past it, it's a good little flag to have to say, when we're rational, this is a decision that we would have made. So that's a good way to know when to stop. Now, I spoke to one woman who went until she got her baby, and she said, I never wanted to think about when I would stop. But that was a conscious decision. As long as it's a conscious decision about something, you can live with that later. So there is no right way of knowing when to stop, but you can plan for that. The other thing you can plan for And there is a bit of evidence around to suggest that if you do this, you are much more likely to be successful in your fertility treatment because you're relaxed about it. You should plan for what your life will look like once you get your baby or once you don't get your baby. And if you give some thought before you start to, if I get to the end and there is no baby, what will things look like? Have a short, medium and long-term plan. Perhaps you might get to the end. You say, we're going to spend this amount of money. If we get to the end of that, we have no child, let's go on a holiday. Then I'm going to take up a course of study, or then I'm going to go and volunteer with a charity. So I spoke to a woman, and as you say, Mia, I reproduced her email at the end of the book. She was nothing short of phenomenal. I've never met her. We spoke on the phone. We go by email. She went through fertility treatment. They did that. They decided, her and her husband, that was the last one they were going to do, and they got to the end and there was nothing. So she realised that she had to then figure out, what does her legacy look like? And when we think about kids, if you're honest with yourself, your kids are your legacy. They are what you leave when you go. So if you don't have that legacy, what's your legacy going to be? And she spent a lot of time talking to her sister, who ironically had decided to remain childless, never tried to fall pregnant, never wanted kids. And her sister was like a mentor to her. And she said, if this is you, find yourself a woman who's never had kids and get them to mentor you through. Your mentor, you have a mentor for your job. I actually say in the book, I think you should try and find a buddy or a mentor through your fertility treatment. But when you get to the end, find someone who's never had children and get them to mentor you through the process. So her process really was, what is my legacy? Now, she's decided to volunteer with a charity that works with animals. She loves kids, but she just can't volunteer with kids. And that will be her legacy. And as days go by, she's comfortable at that. Now, she wasn't quite at the end of working through that process, and she wasn't sure she ever would be, but she had a process and she had a plan and she was working towards something. So she was just fantastic to see that she was in the process of saying to her friends, I don't want to be cut off from your kids. I want to be the fun auntie that takes them for the day and fills them full of sugar and hands them back to you to do rainbow-coloured poos and have meltdowns. Exactly, not my issue. So she really was working on a plan. So I think if you come out the other end and you don't have a baby, yes, grieve. Yes, bloody feel sorry for yourself, because you should. Do whatever you need to do, but then have a plan. Have a plan about what next, because you've got to put your foot forward. And when I spoke to this woman, she said to me, I'm telling you this story because I want my story to be a lighthouse. And so I've spoken about her a bit, and I got a message from her the other day saying she thanked me for encouraging her to share her story. And she said, I really just hope it helps someone. And it's going to help lots and lots of women and men who get to this point to know that there are people out there who have got here and they have survived, and they've come out the other side, and there is a process that you can go to that will help you do that.
Liz, thank you so much for writing this book, If at First You Don't Conceive, your friendly guide to tackling infertility. You have been a lighthouse in sharing your story, in sharing the stories of other women, and in passing all of this information. This is like the version of a prehistoric campfire where women would sit around and pass information throughout, so it could circulate throughout the tribe and ensure the ongoing survival of the tribe. And that's what you've done in this book.
Thank you. Thanks,
Mia.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can buy Liz's book, If at First You Don't Conceive, at any good bookstore or at apple.co/mamamia. Can I recommend this as a great gift? It can be so lonely when you feel like you're going through infertility and you don't really want to tell anyone. But if you have a sister or a friend or a daughter or someone that's going through infertility, it's just such a great gift to give them and such a big help. No Filter is produced by Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and I will see you on the homepage at mamamia.com.au.
If you're after more women's health news, Well is your full body health check. We drop every week on a Thursday. Coming up in our next topic, we're talking about something that a lot of us are not getting enough of, and that is sleep. And I mean, we're talking sleep disorders like insomnia, why we can't sleep, why you can't get enough sleep, why we can't stay asleep. That is all headed your way. There's a link to follow us in the show notes, but make sure you check us out wherever you get your podcasts.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.